What if the greatest guitar players who ever lived never became household names? Not because they lacked talent, not because they didn't have the chops, but because they were too real for the machine, too honest for the industry, too focused on the music to care about the spotlight. Today, we're going deep on 10 guitarists who never chased fame but left everything on the stage anyway. These are the players the industry couldn't bottle, couldn't control, and ultimately couldn't ignore even when it tried. Stick around. This one's for the real ones. If you're new here, this channel is dedicated to the players, the records, and the moments that defined rock and metal's golden age. The stuff that actually mattered. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and let's get into it. Number 10, Buck Dharma, Blue Oyster Cult.
With the eyes and the shining hair, fantasize.
Let's start where most people sleep, and that's exactly the point. Buck Dharma, born Donald Roser. The quiet architect behind one of rock's most mysterious and enduring bands, Blue Oyster Cult, active since their formation, while the band built its entire identity on cryptic lyrics and eerie, occult-drenched imagery. Buck was doing something most guitarists in that era completely ignored. He was writing melodies that lasted forever. His solo on Don't Fear the Reaper in 1976 is textbook restraint. In an era when guitarists were competing to play faster, louder, and more chaotically, Buck played less. And it hit harder than all of them. That solo is subtle, melodic, and so perfectly placed that most people hum it without even realizing they're quoting a guitar solo. But go back even earlier. Then came The Last Days of May in 1972. That's a track that shows you something different, sensitive, cinematic. A guitarist thinking like a film composer, not a rock showman. Then, fast forward to 1977 and Godzilla. And there's the other side of Buck. Precise, powerful, and completely controlled aggression. And here's what separates Buck from almost every name on this list: he never left. He never had a meltdown, never went solo chasing solo glory, never burned the band down. He carried Blue Oyster Cult through the decades, continuing to tour and record well into the 2020s. Still active, still sharp, still showing up. That kind of loyalty to the music, not the fame, not the money. The music is rare. Number 9, Michael Schenker. "17 years old. That's how old Michael Schenker was when he played lead guitar on the Scorpions' debut album, Lonesome Crow, released in 1972, and his tone and phrasing were already beyond what most seasoned professionals were producing. Schenker didn't stay with the Scorpions long. He joined UFO shortly after, and that move changed everything for him. His solo on Rock Bottom, and specifically the live version captured on Strangers in the Night, is still considered one of the high watermarks in hard rock guitar playing. What made Schenker different from the shredders of his era wasn't his speed, though he had it when he needed it. It was his taste, his melodic instinct. His vibrato was smooth, his dynamic control was surgical, and his solos had a narrative arc. You could follow the story from the first note to the last. That's not technique, that's musicianship. After UFO, he formed the Michael Schenker Group and kept evolving, weaving classical music influences into heavy rock with a precision that most players can only study but never replicate. Schenker didn't just play guitar solos. He sculpted moments, and every single one of those moments told a complete story. Number 8, Alex Lifeson. Here's the thing about being in a band with Neil Peart and Geddy Lee, the world's greatest drummer, and one of rock's most distinctive vocalists and bass players. People sometimes forget there was a third member of Rush. Alex Lifeson was the quiet craftsman, while Peart wrote the lyrics that filled philosophy textbooks, and Lee commanded the sonic center with those impossibly high vocals and locked-in bass lines. Lifeson was underneath it all, weaving guitar parts that gave the entire band its depth. He didn't compete for space. He carved his own. And that discipline, that ego-free approach to his instrument, is what made him extraordinary. Early on, tracks like Anthem and Working Man showed Leifson had grit and real rock bite. But as Rush matured, so did he. By the time they reached Moving Pictures and Hemispheres, Leifson had developed a style rooted in atmosphere. His use of chorus and delay became a signature sound, adding width and texture that elevated every single track he touched. And then, there's the solo in Limelight. It soars. It genuinely soars, but it never overshadows the song. It fits perfectly, completely. That's not an accident. That's a guitarist who understood that serving the song is the highest form of the craft. Leifson didn't just play the song. He built the space the song lived in. Number 7, Steve Howe. Progressive rock is a genre built on technical ambition, and in that world, Steve Howe was operating on a completely different level. As the guitarist for Yes, Howe didn't just play guitar, he opened up entirely new textures in what rock music could be. He brought acoustic, electric, classical, and steel string styles to the table, sometimes all within the same song. What he added wasn't just technical firepower, it was imagination. Take The Clap, a solo acoustic piece, recorded live in one take. It's quick, clever, joyful. It sounds like ragtime music dressed up in rock clothing, and it was pulled off in front of a live audience without a safety net. Then jump to Siberian Khatru, or Roundabout, and you hear Howe layering country bends, jazz flourishes, and classical phrasing into arrangements that still hold up 50 years later. That's not just impressive, that's timeless. Where other guitarists in the early 70s were locked into distortion and power chords, Howe was playing like a composer, building passages, creating tension, telling stories. His work on Fragile and Close to the Edge helped define the entire DNA of progressive rock. He didn't follow the song. He sculpted it precisely, patiently, and always with feel. We're halfway through, and it only gets more intense from here. If this kind of deep dive content speaks to you the real history, the real stories, the players who changed everything without anyone noticing, subscribe right now. New videos every week. Now, let's keep going. Number 6, Robin Trower. Before Robin Trower became his own legend, he was the guitarist in Procol Harum, the band the world knows for A Whiter Shade of Pale. But Trower was never built for Baroque pop. He was chasing something heavier, something deeper. When he went solo in the early 70s, that vision became undeniable. His 1974 album, Bridge of Sighs, arrived right in the middle of an era when guitar rock was all about volume, speed, and bravado. Trower went in the exact opposite direction. That record wasn't a blast of noise. It was a slow, deliberate drift into mood and atmosphere. His tone, thick, liquid, drenched in univibe, wrapped around the listener like smoke in a dark room. Tracks like Daydream and Two Rolling Stoned didn't need speed. They had soul. They had space. They had weight. Trower understood something that most guitarists of his generation never figured out. Silence is part of the music. Space isn't absence, it's presence. In a world where everyone was trying to be the loudest guitarist in the room, Robin Trower whispered, and those who were really listening heard something they never forgot. Number 5, Frank Marino, Mahogany Rush. Watch Live at the Agora from the late 70s, and you'll see exactly what Frank Marino was. Eyes half closed, locked in, channeling something that doesn't have a clean explanation. With Mahogany Rush, Marino built a reputation for extended improvisational pieces that felt less like rock performances and more like meditations. Early in his career, the critics had a lazy answer. They called him a Hendrix imitator and moved on. Here's the truth. Yes, Hendrix was a massive influence. Marino himself described a spiritual connection to Hendrix following a psychedelic experience as a teenager. He's never hidden that. But what followed that influence was entirely, uniquely his own. His phrasing was fluid. His tone was thick and vocal-like. The guitar sounded like it was speaking, not just playing. And his delay-drenched solos seemed to stretch and bend time itself in a way that's technically difficult to explain and emotionally impossible to ignore. His live version of Dragonfly is a masterclass in tension and release. Every bend, every sustain intentional, every moment of space earned. Joe Bonamassa, one of the most respected voices in blues and rock guitar today, has called Marino one of the most criminally underrated players of all time. That's not hype. That's an accurate assessment from someone qualified to make it. Marino didn't chase trends. He didn't chase radio play. He just played. And what he left behind still echoes in the fingers of today's best players. Number 4, Terry Kath, Chicago. Stop what you're doing, because this is the one that hits different. Jimi Hendrix, arguably the most gifted electric guitarist in the history of rock music, once heard Terry Kath play and turned to Chicago's Walt Parazader and said, "Your guitar player is better than me." He meant it. Listen to early Chicago before the power ballads, before the horns took over the identity of the band, and you'll hear Terry Kath unleashing pure, controlled chaos on that guitar. The kind of playing that defies easy categorization. Take the solo on 25 or 6 to 4. That solo doesn't just shred, it breathes. It climbs, it falls, it builds, and it hits you physically in the chest. He was running a Fender Telecaster with a Gibson humbucker installed in it, a hybrid setup that somehow produced a sound that bridged both instruments and belonged to neither. You could hear soul, jazz, and Hendrix in his phrasing, but it always came out sounding like Terry. Find the footage of Chicago at Tanglewood in 1970. Terry Kath died in 1978, a gun accident. He was 31 years old, and rock music lost something that day it has never fully recovered. Number 3, Johnny Winter. The first time most people saw Johnny Winter, it was footage from Woodstock. He walks on stage skin pale as moonlight, long white hair hanging down, a Les Paul slung low, and he tears immediately into Meantown Blues. No warm-up, no acknowledgement of the crowd, no performance of being a rock star, just straight fire. That was Johnny Winter. He attacked the guitar. He slid, bent, and shredded with a fury that felt less like performance and more like survival. But underneath all that speed and raw energy was something that mattered more: deep, genuine respect for the blues. Muddy Waters, the godfather of Chicago blues, one of the most important musical figures of the 20th century, called Johnny one of the best he'd ever heard. And Johnny proved it wasn't flattery by producing 3 of Muddy's late career albums out of nothing but pure love for the music and the man. Winter battled heroin addiction. He battled serious health issues. He battled an industry that didn't always know what to do with him. But he never stopped. Even toward the very end of his life, slouched in a chair, barely able to stand, his fingers still moved like lightning. The blues kept him alive, and we are all lucky he kept sharing it. Number 2, Roy Buchanan. There's a PBS documentary from 1971 called Introducing Roy Buchanan, the world's greatest unknown guitarist. Watch it, because the moment Roy Buchanan picks up his 1953 Telecaster in that plain room, wearing plain clothes, with zero rock star energy, everything you think you know about what the electric guitar can do gets quietly dismantled. No distortion pedals, no effects chain, just volume swells, pinch harmonics, and pure touch. He made that guitar weep. He made it sound like a human voice breaking under the weight of something real. His version of Sweet Dreams, slow, aching, full of deliberate space, is one of the most emotionally devastating guitar performances ever committed to tape. You could hear the sorrow in every single note. Roy wasn't playing music in that performance. He was exercising something. He turned down the Rolling Stones when they came calling, just like the player at number 1 on this list. Maybe he knew he was too pure for that machine. Maybe he just couldn't operate inside a system built on image and commerce. He struggled with alcohol. He struggled with depression. He never found the commercial footing that matched his talent. And his death in 1988, under circumstances that remain deeply troubling in a jail cell, still doesn't sit right with anyone who digs into the details. But his playing, that truth he put into those strings, it stays with you, long after everything else fades. Number 1. Rory Gallagher. In January 1975, the Rolling Stones needed a new guitarist. Mick Taylor had just walked out on one of the biggest bands on the planet. The Stones reached out to multiple players. One of them was Rory Gallagher. Rory came. He jammed with them. He genuinely bonded with Charlie Watts, one of the greatest drummers in rock history. But Keith Richards was deep in his addiction at that point and was barely showing up to his own band's sessions. Rory couldn't wait indefinitely. He had a tour to Japan booked. He had commitments to his own music, his own audience, his own truth. So he left a note and flew to Japan. Some people frame that story as Rory turning down the Rolling Stones. The reality is more honest than that. The opportunity simply slipped away because Rory was already committed to something that mattered more to him than joining the biggest rock band in the world. That's who he was. That guitar tone of his warm, biting, and absolutely unmistakable came from his famously battered Stratocaster. That guitar looked like it had been through a war, because in many ways it had. It wasn't flashy gear. It wasn't boutique equipment. It was decades of sweat, road miles, and pure commitment worn into the wood and metal. Songs like "A Million Miles Away" carry a kind of emotional longing that doesn't age. It doesn't date itself to a decade. It just hits the way only deeply honest music can. And Live? Rory Gallagher on a live stage was one of the most complete experiences in all of rock music. He was sweat, soul, and sincerity every single night. No ego, no performance of being a performer. Just a man, a beat-up guitar, and music that meant everything. No other slot on this list makes sense for him. 10 guitarists, 10 different paths, 10 different ways of saying the same thing, that fame is a distraction and the music is the point. These players didn't need validation. They didn't need the machine. They had something better. They had the truth of what they were doing. If this video spoke to you, smash that like button. It genuinely helps more people find this content and keeps this channel going. Subscribe if you haven't already. We go this deep every single week on the players, the records, and the moments that made rock and metal what it is. Drop a comment below which of these 10 hits the hardest for you. Who's the one that you think still doesn't get enough credit? Let's talk about it. And if you want to go deeper, check out the video on screen right now. You're going to want to see it. Keep it loud, keep it real. See you in the next one.